Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, As-salatu was-salam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear students. Today we will be covering from Book 9, Unit 1, Lesson number 2. Now, Lesson number 2 will cover evidence for Tawheed in regards to Allah's beautiful names and attributes, which in Arabic is al-Asmaa'Was-Sifaat. Now, what is the connection between Tawheed and al-Asmaa'Was-Sifaat? So how is Tawheed related to the beautiful names and attributes of Allah? Going back to our understanding about the pillars of Iman, the first pillar of Iman is to believe in Allah. But it is also to believe in Allah in the correct way. What is the correct way? The correct way is to believe that Allah is one without any partners and that there is nothing like unto Him. Now this principle we will apply onto the names and attributes of Allah as well. What are the names? What are the beautiful names and attributes of Allah? They are the description of Allah, the God that we worship. It describes the nature of God. Hence, it is very important that we do not deviate from Tawheed, that we apply our understanding of Tawheed in regards to the beautiful names and attributes of Allah as well. Unfortunately, throughout history, man has distorted the nature of God by comparing God's attributes and likening them to humans or creation. This is not befitting Allah's majesty and greatness and violates the concept of Tawheed by setting up partners besides the Creator. So if we look at history, what people have done when they are trying to comprehend the nature of God is they have given God attributes of humans. So they've given God human-like qualities, whereas Allah should only be described by the names which Allah has described Himself in the Quran or in the Sunnah. And this is also quite dangerous when we, or when humans in the past, have likened God to His creation. This is dangerous because Allah is unique, Allah is all-powerful, Allah is majestic. But when we liken Allah to His creation, we are saying we're setting up partners besides Allah. We are saying that the creation is equal to the Creator, and this is a violation of Tawheed, and when someone does that, they fall into disbelief. So we must maintain the Tawheed of Allah as Muslims by affirming the beautiful names and attributes of Allah, and this is the key point, as they have been revealed, without interpreting them or likening them to creation. So in the last slide, I talked about how it is important to maintain the oneness of Allah even in our understanding of God, in His names and attributes. And I talked about how people in the past have fallen into error and into disbelief when they've used their reasoning alone to understand God. They have given God, or they have attributed God with human-like qualities, thereby setting up partners alongside Allah. They have equated Allah to His creation, which is violating Tawheed. In this slide, I am going to illustrate why using reasoning alone is a flawed approach in understanding the nature of God, His qualities, and why we need revelation. So when, as humans, right, we aren't sure about something, we rely on our perception to make educated guesses about what that something might be. So I have an example for you. Let's imagine that I'm happy with one of you. You have been obedient, you have performed well in class, so I decide to give you a present. Here's this present, it's a box, and in the box there's something inside. Now I want you to guess what is inside that box. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to guess what is inside this box in this present. Whatever your answer is going to be, your answer will depend upon mainly two factors. It will depend upon your senses and how your mind perceives the information it collects from your senses. So what are your senses? Your senses are your hearing, your sight, your taste, your smell, etc. And what does it mean to perceive? Your brain is able to collect all the information that it's getting from its sensory receptors, like I mentioned, and it is interpreting it. And that interpretation is influenced by three things: your memories, your past experiences, and your feelings. So your senses and your perception will influence what your answer is going to be about what is inside that gift. Some of you might think that there might be a PS4, if you're lucky. There might be a book, or it just could be a box of chocolates. But what is really inside the box, and because I'm the teacher and I'm giving you the gift, is actually it's a Lamborghini. But not a real Lamborghini, of course, a toy Lamborghini. So I wonder how many of you correctly guessed that it was a toy Lamborghini. Not just a Lamborghini, but a toy Lamborghini. But the reason why I brought this up as an example is that each of you, because you did not know what was inside the present, inside the box, you relied on your perception. And your perception was influenced by maybe what you wanted it to be. Maybe you wanted a PS4, so you thought it would be a PS4. But what it actually was something beyond what you imagined. Right? So if we are unable to determine what is inside the box with certainty, then how is it possible to perceive God's nature, who we cannot even see and who is unlimited? What this also illustrates is that humans are limited in their knowledge, capabilities, and capacities. Like, even though this box was right in front of you, you could not guess what was inside. You did not have X-ray vision to see what was inside. You could not predict what was inside. So our capacity, our capabilities, our knowledge is limited. So luckily, this was just an example. There was nothing important here. But now what happens if the same humans that are limited in their knowledge, in their capabilities and capacities, now they try and perceive the nature of God? Now this is dangerous, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the universe and everything inside it. He is beyond our imagination. Whatever we imagine about Allah, that is not Allah. Because our minds, we cannot even we don't have the mental capacity to visualize Allah. So when humans make an effort to comprehend the nature of God, His qualities, His attributes, what is going to happen? It's a flawed approach. They're going to determine the nature of God based on their experiences, their feelings, their memories, and what has happened in the past is they've given God human-like qualities. But that is not Allah, like I said, and similar to the example that I gave, that you thought the box might be, inside the box it might be a PS4, there might be a book, But what was inside the book was beyond your imagination. It was a Lamborghini. Likewise, Allah is beyond our imagination. We cannot use our reason because our human faculties are limited. So we need divine revelation from God Himself in the Quran and in the Sunnah to understand the essence of God's nature. The Quran contains verses that speak about the names and attributes of Allah, in addition to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated by the Prophet. So why can't we rely on our perception to know Allah? As I mentioned earlier, when humans have used limited human faculties, their senses, their perception, to understand the full nature of God, they have attributed human-like qualities to God. So an example is Zeus and Hercules. Hercules, who's the son of God, is depicted as a strong, well-built individual. Clearly, and that this depiction of God, describing God in the human image, is not maintaining the Tawheed of Allah. We are ascribing human-like qualities to God, which is not befitting the greatness and the majesty of Allah. Because Allah is beyond our imaginations. We cannot use our limited human faculties, our senses, our perception to understand God. We need revelation. And a good example was the example of the present. So, giving God human qualities, this is a major form of deviance and heresy because it describes God in the image of a man and makes the presumption that God's actions and requests are also like humans, based on need or to compensate for some deficiency. This is one reason why the people of the book, such as the Christians, went astray. The Christians say that God had a son, which we know as Muslims that this is completely and utterly false, and that God had a son, and the son was a human. So guess what? This human had needs and wants and deficiencies. Is this befitting the essence of God? Of course it's not. It is shirk. So when we examine the world around us and the magnitude and the magnificence of the universe, we can infer the greatness and graciousness of the one who brought it into existence. He is beyond our mental capacity to even imagine, let alone having human-like qualities. So when we look at the world around us, how intricate it is, how perfect and harmonious it is, then we can infer that the one who created it is even greater, is even more majestic. So how can we even mentally imagine Allah, let alone as a human being? That is not befitting Allah's majesty and perfection. So I hope that clarifies and establishes that we cannot use our perception to understand the nature of God, to understand the qualities of God. We must rely on revelation, wahi. So then, what does revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah, teach us about God's nature? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides knowledge about His nature by stating His attributes, qualities in the Quran, or by what the Prophet has stated about the attributes of Allah in the Sunnah. So some of Allah's beautiful names and attributes include: He is Ar-Rahman, the most merciful; He is As-Sami', the all-hearing one; He is Al-Basir, the all-seeing one. What you will also notice, the qualities of Allah that I just mentioned, we also share those same qualities. But does that mean that they are identical? That Allah has the same qualities that we do? For instance, humans can see, humans can hear, and we also have the ability to show mercy as well. However, like I mentioned before, when we look at the signs around us, we come to the realization that the one who has created all of this, everything that is around us, the one who has created humans, the one who's created the animals, the one who's created the earth and the entire universe, that divine being is unlimited, is majestic, is perfect. So our quality and their quality and his quality, it cannot be the same. It must be understood differently. And the quality, when Allah refers to a quality, it takes the greatest form compared to the human qualities. So for instance, humans have knowledge, right? But that knowledge is limited. But God is known as al-Alim, the all-knowing one. God's knowledge is complete and it's perfect. Allah is also as-Sami. We also hear, but Allah's hearing is complete, it is full, it is perfect in its entirety. As humans, we see as well, but Allah is al-Basir. He is the all-seeing one. He sees everything. His seeing is perfect, is complete. Humans cannot even see in the darkness, but Allah can see a black ant on a dark night at the bottom of the forest. The other important point about the shared qualities between humans and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as as-Sami, al-Basir, Allah hears, we also hear, Allah sees, we also see, that these qualities are only similar in name. They are not identical. Because when we go into interpreting the meaning of these names, we fall into the trap of the previous nations who interpreted the nature of God using their reasoning, and they gave Allah human-like qualities. So when a quality is similar to humans, as Muslims, we just accept and affirm those qualities. They're similar only in name, but they're not identical. So it's not, Allah does not see the way we see, Allah does not hear the way we hear. We affirm the fact that Allah hears, and that is befitting His majesty and His perfection and His greatness. Okay, so the last couple of slides was just some background material that I compiled and developed to give you a sound understanding about Tawheed as it relates to the beautiful names and attributes of Allah. And now the last slide and the last couple of slides will go through some of the main points from Unit 1, Lesson 2. So the texts of the Quran prove that Allah's names are numerous. There are 99 names of Allah that have been mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah. But according to the scholars, it is not confined to 99 names, but these are the 99 names that Allah has revealed to us in the Quran, or that the Prophet ﷺ has stated in the Sunnah. Tawheed related to Allah's names and attributes requires complete acceptance and submission. So all of Allah's beautiful names and attributes that Allah has attributed to Himself, we must accept and submit to them. But accepting these texts with submission also means that we reject and refrain from interpreting God's attributes as human qualities, likening them to His creation. This is a point that I've highlighted in the previous slides, that affirming the qualities that Allah has affirmed for Himself in the Quran also means that we do not delve into how these qualities work. We reject and refrain from interpreting God's attributes, and we do not liken them to His creation. An important principle in the Quran regarding the beautiful names and attributes of Allah is from the verse in Surah Ash-Shura, verse 11, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like unto him, and he is the hearing and the seeing. So this is a very important principle. So Allah is teaching us that the qualities that Allah has attributed to himself, although they might share similar qualities in names with humans, they can never be identical to human qualities, because if they are, we are violating the concept of Tawheed, where we are likening Allah to his creation, which is considered as a heresy. It is falling into disbelief. Okay, so summary of part 1. When we aren't sure of something, we rely on our senses and perception to make an educated guess. Our senses collect information, while our perception processes this information by relying on past experiences, memories, and feelings. However, our human faculties, which is our senses and perception, they are limited. And although they could be used to understand the world around us, they cannot be used to comprehend the full nature of God. For that, we need revelation. And think back to the example that I gave about the gift that was wrapped up. And you might have imagined something that was influenced by your past experiences, your memories, and your feelings. But what it actually was beyond your imagination. So if we could not even establish with certainty what was in the gift, then how can we understand and grasp the full reality of the essence, the nature of God? God created the universe and everything in it. He's not limited by time and space. He's outside of time and space. We cannot visualize. We don't have the mental capacity to visualize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we need a revelation to understand the nature of God, Allah's attributes, Allah's qualities. When humans have used their limited knowledge to understand the nature of God, they have attributed human-like qualities to God and have gone astray. So I gave you the example of Zeus. So in Greek mythology, they described God in the human image. You had Zeus, you had Hercules, but even the Christians, they described God as a human as well. You've got a white Jesus, a black Jesus, even a female Jesus. But all of these groups of peoples, the idolaters, the people of the book that have all gone astray, they all made the same mistake, they all made the same flaw. They tried to perceive, to know, to understand God from the limited knowledge and human faculties. And when they did that, they gave God human qualities, and thereby, from an Islamic point of view, this violates the Tawheed of Allah, that Allah is one, that there's nothing like Allah, and He's without partners. The attributes that God shares with humans need to be understood differently and in their greatest form. The attributes of God and humans are not identical, but only similar in the names used to describe their attributes. So there's two things here. When Allah and humans share similar qualities, like I mentioned, al-Rahman, al-Sami', al-Basir, then the qualities that Allah possesses, Allah's qualities are complete, are perfect, and our qualities are limited, are imperfect, are deficient. And the second thing is that these qualities of, let's say, hearing and seeing, which are similar to humans, these are not identical. They're only similar in the names used to describe those attributes. So we do not know how Allah sees, we do not know how Allah hears, What we do know is that we share similar names that are used to describe those attributes. As a Muslim, we must accept these attributes and we do not interpret them. We do not possess the mental capacity to imagine Allah. When we examine the world around us, we are reminded about the greatness and magnificence of the Creator. Thus, we can only affirm all the beautiful names and attributes of Allah in a way that is befitting Allah's greatness and majesty. When you look at the world around you, you come to the realization that the one who created all of this, that divine being is great and magnificent. So we cannot fully comprehend our Creator, but we can affirm the attributes that Allah has attributed to Himself in the Quran and the Sunnah in a way that is befitting Allah's greatness and majesty. Revelation in the Quran and Sunnah also teaches us a key principle to apply in our understanding of al-Asmaa'Was-Sifaat, that لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like Him. Summary Part 2. Tawheed related to Allah's names and attributes requires acceptance and submission to Allah's lofty names and attributes that are stated in the authentic texts, the Quran and Sunnah. Submission means to accept them in the manner in which they were revealed, without distorting them, without denying them, or explaining them, or likening God to any of His creations. Now, this is the most important and fundamental point, is that when we affirm the attributes that Allah has affirmed for Himself in the Quran, or as stated by the Prophet ﷺ in the Sunnah, such as Ar-Rahman, As-Sami' al-Basir, that we accept them and we submit to them, right? But we do not go about to distort them, deny them, try to explain how does Allah hear, how does Allah see, and we definitely do not try to perceive Allah, because like I mentioned before, Allah is unlimited. Allah is beyond space and time. Humans are limited, our knowledge is limited, our capabilities are limited, our capacity is limited. So whatever we imagine about Allah, that is not Allah. And the people who have tried to perceive Allah, they have given God human-like qualities, thereby falling into disbelief. So that is something that we cannot do. We just affirm, we accept, we submit, but we do not go in to interpret them. And this is backed up by what Allah teaches us in the Quran. And we have derived a principle from this. The principle is based on the statement of Allah in Surah Ash-Shura, verse 11, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Those who do not describe Allah in the manner in which Allah has described Himself have been severely warned, and whoever rejects any of Allah's magnificent names and lofty attributes has fallen into disbelief. So this is an important matter, that if Muslims do not accept the lofty names and attributes of Allah, if they reject it, then they have fallen into disbelief. Allah has informed us of the greatest description, which involves affirming perfection for Him alone. So whoever negates that Allah has the attributes of perfection, Allah has described those individuals with the most evil descriptions. So remember when I said that when Allah is Al-Alim, He is the all-knowing one. Yes, humans also have the quality of knowledge, but like I said before, our knowledge is limited. We do not have knowledge of everything. And so Allah's knowledge is the most perfect, most complete in its entirety. And so this is an attribute that Allah has affirmed for Himself, the attribute of perfection. So whoever negates this, then Allah has described them with the most evil description. So we must refrain from that as well. So this concludes the lesson on Tawheed of al-Asmaa'Was-Sifaat. So I've deliberately not gone through every item in this lesson. So I've covered the basic principles, the important points. Now I want you to go through pages 6 and 9, right? And then I want you to do the exercises at the end of this lesson, lesson number 2 in unit 1. So the exercise, activity 1 and activity 2. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.